Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. This is Pastor's Point of View number 351. This is being released April the 25th, 2025, for a particular reason. We in the Sugarland area are just started early voting. We've got an election coming up May 3rd, and so I wanted to interview one of the candidates that's running for Sugarland City Council District 4. I'm with Rick Miller, who's a great guy, friend of mine. Just a little background on him. He's a graduate of the Naval Academy. He had a very illustrious career in the private sector, in the business world. And then he decided to run for the Texas House. He was in the Texas House for 8 years. And just when he is getting ready to relax and put his feet up and enjoy life a little bit, he felt the calling to run for Sugarland City Council District number 4. So Rick, welcome to the show. Thanks for
Andy.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking your neck out there. I guess kind of as an introductory question, I would ask you, can I put it this way? What's wrong with you? Shouldn't you be on the golf course? Shouldn't you be shuffleboard? Why in the world would you, at this stage in your life, decide to run for City Council of Sugarland?
Well, I guess it follows the pattern of my life. I've been a kind of a lifelong public servant. I spent 30 years in the Navy and then got out the private sector in the corporate America for a little bit, and then went to the Texas House and did that for 8 years. And I was enjoying not doing that and working business stuff and nonprofit things. And then the calling came to get involved in the city government, because I think it's at a point where it needs people like me to be involved and to do the right things for the city and the citizens. Right.
Yeah, in fact, the mayor specifically tapped your shoulder and gave some reasons why he thinks you ought to.
The mayor called me a couple months ago, and I've been thinking about it because I stay abreast of local issues as well as state issues, national issues. And I saw where the majority of the council was turning over this year, and that's that could be a good thing, or it could be a concerning thing depending on who gets elected. So he called me and asked me to consider jumping into the race.
Okay, so there's just a host of issues we could talk about, but one of the things that is on the minds of people that frequently watch our videos is these Islamic sort of enclaves that are being built all over the state of Texas. And so we have a quick video. This comes from Memory. This stands for Middle Eastern Media Research Institute. It's one of my favorite websites because it takes Arabic talk and translates it. We don't need a translation here because the gentleman is speaking in English. Right. In fact, I use the word gentleman very loosely based on what he's going to say here. This only goes for about 45 seconds, but it was at some kind of, in Dearborn, Michigan, a heavy Islamic area. It was kind of like a poetry contest, and you can see people in the background laughing, enjoying some drinks, eating popcorn, and this guy just drops a verbal bomb. And so let's run that video real quick if we could.
Yeah.
The message for the people of Gaza is going to be more of the message that should be sent to the people here, in that they have achieved victory. We haven't done anywhere near enough. And the people here, I promise you, we do feel ashamed. We do feel like we're not doing enough. We do feel like change needs to come, because change must come. And in the form that it must come is that this empire, the American empire that's been hurting our people since the beginning, the imperial Western powers that have been hurting our people since the beginning, they must fall. And inshallah they will fall. And my message to the people of Gaza and the oppressed peoples across the world is that there are people here, both young and old, who are going to be willing to fight and are willing to put their lives and everything they can on the line to bring these empires down, because they must come down.
So you hear something like that. What's your? And this is probably one of the first times you've seen that, right?
It is.
So
I hadn't seen that
how would you react to something like that? I mean, and just your thoughts as a Christian, as an American.
Well, it kind of verifies some other things I've read and heard and seen about the intent of the Muslim, some of the Muslim communities, and it's scary. Our country was founded on anybody can come as long as we can, and they can assimilate into our culture and who we are as Americans. So obviously this is not the intent for some people.
So we're pro-immigration.
Right.
Just use the front door.
You use the right door.
Yeah,
right.
And come and enjoy the melting pot of America, but you can't come here with hostile intentions of tearing America down. You can't come here to build sort of a dual culture, with its own legal system right here in the United States.
Right, and this is a problem. I mean, because it's a threat. To our country and to what we stand for and to our Constitution and the things in our Constitution. And so we have to deal with this. We have to figure out what the best way to confront this and take care of it. But
I don't know if you know Beth Van Dyne. She's in the House now. You know her?
No, I don't know her personally, but I know of her.
She was either mayor before she went into the House of Representatives in Frisco or Plano, and she basically said no to a Sharia court system that they were seeking to build in our area. And this is the power that local officials can have, can't they?
Well, yes, absolutely. From the first time I got elected as a state representative here in Texas, I would get calls or, hey, what about what's happening with the city or the county? And I'd always go back to them and I'd say, hey, look, I'm a state guy and I do state policy, but the most important people in the lives of our citizens are our local folks. Mm-hmm. The city council, the mayor, city council of Sugar Land, and our county folks, our school board officials, our trustees. They're the most important ones for, to know who they are, vote for the right people. And we're coming up on this election on May 3rd with a very important election for our Fort Bend ISD school board and for the city of Sugar Land. And so but the problem is the election in May is the fewest number of people percentage-wise of our registered voters actually vote.
Yeah. Well, Christians like myself, evangelicals, conservatives, we have a tendency to really pay attention to national presidential elections. But when it comes to local issues, we kind of take a nap. But these kind of issues that we're talking about, I mean, if you don't have good people in place at the local level, these kind of things are going to proliferate, aren't they?
They are. They are. And that is a concern. And that was one of the reasons that when the mayor called me and I talked to a few other people that this was a concern, and we want the right people in the right positions, as I say, making the right decisions for the right reasons. And so we have to figure out what the rights are and all of that. But this is where it's important to elect the officials that are going to keep Sugar Land going in the right direction for the right reasons. And so we just have to be careful of who we vote for, and we're going to talk more about that, I'm sure.
Well, let's, I got a few clippings. We're not going to spend a lot of time reading these, just want to give you the headlines, just how Texas, these enclaves are being built all over Texas, and I'll give you some specifics related to Sugar Land in just a second. But notice this Rare Foundation article. It says Islamic conquest in Texas, Pflugerville's mosque's packed agenda for $1 million expansion, and there's a video embedded in this article where you can see it. Here's another screenshot of a model that's being constructed in Plano. This is called the East Plano Islamic Center. The best I can tell, it looks like, and they may deny this, but it looks like it's some kind of Sharia compliant type of entity that they're creating with schools and so forth to insulate their children, Muslim children, from any Western influence or Western values. See, this is a parallel society being built in our state, in one of the most conservative states in the Union.
It is, and I know from a state view of this that the governor is, I think, put in place an investigation of really what's going on here, so that it does become a separate political entity.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because the big question we get when we talk about things like this is, what's the governor doing? And this is not front page news that we're reporting on here. I mean, Mark Levin on Fox News the other night was talking about the same thing. Right. And I was sort of heartened to learn that our governor is aware and he's doing certain things.
Yes. But
could he do more?
I think he's got the Texas Rangers investigating, and that's really good that he's doing that. What is the intent of this? Well, I think we know what the intent is. It looks like what we know what the intent is, and that's a very good thing that he's not sitting idle and just watching this happen. And so he's trying to do something about this. I think the Attorney General's involved in it, which is really good, and so. I was really happy to read that and see that. So.
Yeah, just a few more pictures. Here's one of the DMCC. This stands for the Democratic. Let's see, what does that stand for? DMCC, not Democratic, but Dallas Metroplex Community Center.
Wow.
Now let's go outside of the state of Texas for a minute. Here's another Rare Foundation article. These are things happening in Patterson, New Jersey, where they've renamed Main Way in the city Palestine Way. Here is a picture of a police officer in Patterson, New Jersey. He's got his uniform on, and you notice he's got a flag under him. That's not the Texas flag, is it? And that's not the American.
No, I don't think it is.
That's not the American flag. Of course, he would be in New Jersey, so he wouldn't have the Texas flag on. But that's not the state flag. That's actually, when you research that, that's the Palestinian flag. And so this is just an example of this parallel culture that they're seeking to build here. And I'm just trying to show people that this is not just in Texas. It's going on everywhere. Here is a police officer in New York City. With a hijab on, and she, of course, in this article, Amy Meek, is reporting how they're boasting in this, and they want to see more of this. Do you think that the state of Texas has been intentionally targeted? Because I'm kind of the view that they look at Texas as the reddest of the red. If you don't have a red Texas in the Electoral College, you'll never see a Republican president ever again. And so I think this may be one of the reasons why these things are happening in Texas. I think they think if they can flip Texas, they can do it anywhere. What can they do in Massachusetts? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's obvious that that's what's happening. Excuse me. To some degree, it's happened here where we are. Sugar Land is the reason that my first wife and I moved here seemed like a really great place to live 25 years ago. And I'm having something in my throat. Excuse me. But
you get some water over there if you need it.
But and so the demographics in Sugar Land changed over the last 6 to 8 years tremendously, with people moving in. Lots of the Muslims have moved in, but it sure seems like it's a target. But it was also I was happy to see the election results from past November, where at one point we thought Ted Cruz might be in trouble, but he won by 2 million votes, which was really good. So, but yeah, I think it's a concern, and if people are coming here, that's great if it's for the right reason.
Yeah.
But if it's not, if they're here for their own, setting up their own form of government or that kind of entity, then we need to be really concerned about that.
Yeah. So a lot of this is now getting personal. Talked about things generally happening in Texas, things generally happening in the United States as a whole. But notice this Rare Foundation article here. it says Mecca comes to Texas, and it says Sugarland officials handed the town square to a Pakistani propagandist blacklisted in India to broadcast Islamic supremacy. And within this article, there's a video that we're going to play at this time. Let's go ahead and run the video that happened in the Sugarland Square recently.
At the Makkah, this is the first time in history of Sugarland that we have live azan and live transmission directly from Makkah and Medina. Is that a beautiful feeling, ladies and gentlemen? Makkah on the background. Open air, Sugarland Town Center. What a beautiful, it's such a beautiful feeling.
His home.
Yeah, that gets kind of personal because we, as residents of this city, know that town square backwards and forwards. In fact, let me just get your opinion on this. You saw all of them with that call to prayer there in town square. How many Muslims do you think, given the size of that town square, I'm estimating are at least 500 to maybe 1,000. Is that too high, do you think?
No, that's not high enough. I've heard a number of 1,500 plus.
Oh my goodness.
Right, so
there it is. We actually have a screenshot there of Sugarland Grand Iftar. This is how that particular event was promoted. There's our town square. If your eyes are good, you could see it. But Islamic rendition of Sugarland in that particular screenshot. So a lot of us, and there's actually, if your eyes are good, there's telephone numbers at the bottom of the screen where you can contact the mayor or you can contact city council members. So a lot of us have kind of been upset, and we're trying to get answers. Who allowed this? And so what we're starting to understand a little bit, and you can help us with this, is an independent management company takes applications related to who can rent the square.
that's right.
And so the city council apparently didn't even know this was going to happen. And so I guess my question is are we right on this? And what would Council Member Miller do to change things a little bit?
Right. Yes. I didn't know this had happened. I don't know why I wasn't near that part of the city that day or heard anything about this until you texted me.
Yeah.
And you said, "What is this?" And the natural, I think, inclination was what the city council was involved in this, with the mayor and city, and approved this. So I immediately contacted one of the guys running for mayor, and I said, did you know about this, and did you approve this as a council? And he said, no, we didn't know anything about it. Then I talked to the mayor about it, and he said exactly the same thing. And and they've been asked a lot of questions about it, getting a lot of phone calls, and so I said, well, how does this happen? And there's an entity made up of the merchants there in the town square area that decide what can go in that particular piece of property in front of City Hall. And as a council member, the future council member, hopefully,
Yes.
I would think that we want to know what's going on out there in front of our city hall and what represents our city. And so I think we need to make some connection to who approves things out there and what's going in there to have some say in it.
Yeah.
Be aware of it.
So if you're elected, this would be something that would be a top priority.
Would be
for
on
you.
my agenda,
Yeah.
right, to bring up in a council meeting and say, because the council meets privately, they make no decisions. They just talk about the issues to some degree, maybe a large degree. But then when they come in public, then that's when they discuss it and then vote on it. And so that would be, I think that's a very important issue based on what's happened. I don't know if any other things like that have happened there or not. So
yeah, I'm not aware. But what's interesting is in that one of those videos that we were just showing is the screen behind him as he's talking, the Muslim giving this call to prayer.
Right.
That's not a poster.
no, that's a live shot.
First time I saw that, I thought it was some kind of poster, but that is a live shot into Mecca in Saudi Arabia, where Muslims go and they take 7 trips around, I think is what's called the Kaaba. And so, and then he kind of boasts, as you listen to that video, that we are connecting, is what he's saying. We're connecting
Right.
Mecca with Sugar Land. And so there's some, this is more than just pluralism. It's more than just diversity of thought. There's a message that's being sent here, and it has something to do with conquest. It has something to do with we're here. This is a parallel society within the United States. That's what bothered me about this whole thing.
And it bothers me too. Now it's a public place.
Sure.
And so we have to remember that as well. But we have to think about what are the intentions of it? What's the purpose of it? And what are they trying to do here? And if they're here to be citizens of the United States and assimilate into our country and abide by laws and whatever, that's great. And I fully support that. But if the intent is not that, and we heard from this one video show that it's not that from some people, then that's a concern. And we need to be on guard for that here in our own little city of Sugar Land.
Yeah, because this is not fanciful thinking. I mean, this has actually happened in Europe, where European cities have been taken over. So I'm reading from, we don't have a screenshot on this, but one of the Rare Foundation articles that we referred to earlier, the author, Amy Meek, says, just look at the Western cities already lost. Birmingham, UK. Once a British city, now dominated by Islam with Sharia courts in operation. That's what Beth Van Dyne shut down in Frisco or Plano.
Right.
Sharia courts. That's a judicial system that doesn't fit. You held up a copy of the Constitution earlier.
It's not in here.
It's not called for. That document says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
It is.
Paris, France, where there's now no-go zones, Islamic riots, and demand for Islamic-only laws. She mentions here Stockholm, Sweden, where entire districts are under Islamic control. Police are afraid to enter. And here's what she concludes. Texas is next on the list. Unless Americans wake up, will the West surrender? The reality is stark but simple. The most tolerant culture always submits to the least tolerant culture. The question is, how much longer before Texas bends the knee?
Right. And what I've seen, based on what the governor is doing now and getting involved in this issue with the Texas Rangers, and that's what they do. They investigate things like this, what's happening. And I mean, that's a good thing. So he's aware of it, and he's in a position where he can actually do something about it. And our Attorney General also is involved. So, yeah.
Because the big buzzword is Islamophobia.
Yes.
Which whenever I hear that, I'm always offended because a phobia is an irrational fear. This isn't irrational.
No, it's not. It's real.
This is what they did in Europe.
That's right.
And I don't think the Islam over here is different than the Islam over there. It's the same agenda of worldwide conquest. And so when people throw that expression, Islamophobia, at me, I'm offended by that. And you know what? It's not a racial issue either, because Islam is not a race. Right? It would be like saying you make a statement, you're against Nazis. Well, you're against Germans. See what I'm
Right.
saying?
That's right.
You're against
You're absolutely right.
communists, so you must be against Russians. I mean, that's how inane these labels are that are thrown at us. You're a racist, you're a Islamophobe, and these are the kinds of things that get thrown at you as a conservative politician constantly.
Oh my gosh, yes. I can't tell you the number of times I was called a racist. Not me personally, well maybe, but those of us on the House floor, and those words would come up somewhat frequently, depending on the issue we were talking about or debating. But yeah, I've been called a racist many times. As a proof.
And I think it's those terms are intentionally selected because when they hurl something at you, our reaction is just to back off, and it shuts down dialogue.
Yeah, I mean,
they win.
There's not a racist thing in me.
Exactly.
Right. So it's just an ideology that they can't accept. Right.
Yeah.
I'm very conservative but biblically based, and so that's what's important to me, and that's how I go about my business. But yeah, they don't agree with that, and they're going to do whatever they can to make their point. So.
Yeah. So this is kind of segues us away from this kind of specific issue to more something general that we want to talk about briefly is Christian involvement in the political realm. Boy, you start talking like that today and you get resistance. People say, well, you're getting outside the role of the church, you're getting outside the role of the gospel. Can't you just preach your sermon and go home? Why do you keep telling us to vote? And
that's Dr. Woods, I think.
Studying the issues of the day, because if we are silent, evil wins, doesn't it?
For sure, evil wins, and it's going to win if we don't ignite the interest and motivation of our Christians to get involved.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah,
it's going to make a difference.
So notice this slide here of Matthew 5 verses 13 through 16. Most Christians know this passage very well. Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, "You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." It goes on and it says we're the salt of the earth. How can you be the salt of the earth when you stay in the salt shaker?
I was just thinking about and reading that. I think Ronald Reagan may have said that too when he left office. But
he did. A little history on that. He mentioned that we are a shining city on a hill in his farewell address,
right,
January of 1989. And when he did it, he was quoting Roger Winthrop, one of the leading Puritans that helped establish our country.
That's right. So this brings back a memory of a book I have. I can't remember the title of the book, but maybe the title is this: it's Church on Sunday and Work on Monday. Meaning, okay, we'll go to church and we'll listen to what the pastor has to say and feel good about that. And then when Monday comes, we forget all about that. And we're back to normalcy of how we go about our business, and don't bring this into our business or our society or into elections and voting. So, I mean, that's a problem.
Well, it's a problem. You were giving me some statistics earlier about the number of Christians that sat out a particular election. I don't know if it was the last one or the one before.
I think it was the last one. I had a conversation with Siri on my phone coming over just to say, hey, how many Christians didn't vote in the last election? And the answer that came back was roughly 32 million Christians.
Wow.
And how they determined that, I don't know. But that's a huge number if you think about the elections.
Yeah.
So.
And if that's true of a big national election like that, the statistics are even worse at the local level. And yet, at the local level is where these kinds of issues that we talked about earlier are going to be resolved.
That's where it comes to the fruition, is on the ground level here.
Yeah.
This is ground level. And so, yes, so getting our Christian community involved, and pastors like yourself who are willing to say things about, hey, it's important for us to think about who's running, and your book brings that out. You're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But those are important things for everybody sitting in the pews to think about. Makes a difference.
Well, what kind of, you've been doing this for a long time, what kind of reactions have you gotten from evangelical churches when you've tried to, educate and inform pastors about this?
Right. There's some background here in my experience in thinking about getting Christians involved. One of the larger churches here in the county, if not the largest. I went to the pastor and I said, "Hey, look, you don't have to identify this is this party's platform or this is this party's platform, but just put them up there and talk about them
On the screen.
on the screen,
main service. Okay.
right? And say which one of these platforms line up with our biblical beliefs and principles."
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy to see this is the one that lines up with our biblical perspectives and beliefs. And so, but I couldn't get that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would make a difference, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there may be a few Democrats sitting in the pews out there, but what they believe in supposedly makes a difference in what we end up doing in our legislative work, be it in Washington or Texas or any state. The numbers make a difference in who's in charge and what they can do. And so
numbers being, we have 7 on the city council.
7 on the city council.
So it's going to be a big difference whether one side has 4 votes or 3 votes.
That's right.
Okay.
And so the majority of the council will be new people. I think the mayor will be one of the current council members, but then those other 4 seats will be brand new, and that's a majority, and the majority rules, right? So anyway, so it's important to understand that, and we'll talk more about this, about what to look for, but that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, so numbers matter. Elections have consequences, not just national, but people need to pay attention to local, meaning city council, school board, mayor. We need to be asking, what do people say on some of these issues we're talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let me put up this quote here from Charles Finney. He was the leader of the Second Great Awakening in the United States. His lectures on revival is lecture 15. And I'm not saying I agree with everything Charles Finney has ever said theologically, okay? But boy, what he nails it here. He says the church must take right ground in politics. The time has come that Christians must vote for honest men and take consistent ground in politics. Christians have been exceedingly guilty in this matter. This was back in his day. But the time has come when they must act differently. God cannot sustain this free and blessed country which we love and pray for unless the church will take right ground. It seems sometimes as if the foundations of the nation are becoming rotten, and Christians seem to act as if they think God does not see what they do in politics. But I tell you, He does see it. And He will bless or curse this nation according to the course that Christians take in politics. And
I love it.
We're not talking here about building the kingdom of God on the earth. You're a premillennialist like I am.
Right.
Jesus will set up His kingdom, but
That's right.
And we believe in the rapture. In fact, I met him at the pre-trib study group that meets every December.
That's where we first met you, right?
Yeah. And so he believes in the rapture. I believe in the rapture. Jesus is going to set up the kingdom one day, but we're not raptured yet. We're still here.
I don't think so.
if we are, we're in trouble.
But it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. So there's something for us to do while we're here, right?
Yeah, I think that's what God expects us to do, and so that's why, when I had my calling, you might say, and I explained it this past Saturday to men's group here, is I was just sitting in a very important in church at a special event with Dr. Rick Scarborough.
Scarborough.
Yeah, and he's talking about what we're talking about Christians getting involved in the process to make a difference, a great difference. And so he's talking to me. There were 1,000 people there or 500 people, whatever. And so I turned to my wife, Babs, and I said, I think he's talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about that, and then that's when I first got involved in politics.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit was talking.
Right.
So you're calling into public policy, politics, etc., is just as holy and spiritual as my calling to stand behind a pulpit.
It is.
In fact, Romans 13, we don't have a screenshot on this, but it calls people in government ministers. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, check it out. Romans 13, verses 3 through 5. In other words, the church is a God-ordained ministry of the Lord's. Well, who created government? God did.
God did.
In the
right.
Noahic covenant. And we are so blessed in our country where we as Christians can influence the direction of our country by voting, running for office. Notice this quote here from Benjamin Franklin. This was at the close of the Constitutional Convention of 1787 when he was asked as he left Independence Hall by a lady, quote, "Well, doctor, what have you given us, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin responded, "A republic, if you," see how he put the onus back on her?
Right.
"If you can keep it," close quote.
Well, it's about us, the people, the citizens of this great country. In the right on the front page of this Constitution, it said by George Washington, It's only keepers of this Constitution are us, the people. And if we don't keep this, then stand by. We're not going to be what the country was founded on. And so that's why there's a calling, I think, or should be a calling for Christians to get much more involved, if just to vote.
Yeah.
If just to vote.
Bare minimum.
Right. So.
And you've gone further than that,
A couple times.
Yeah. And how are we going to keep the country if 32 million like-minded people don't even show up to vote? How do we do that?
Well, it comes back to the church, I think.
Yeah.
It comes back to the church. Yes.
Pastors encouraging their flocks to vote
and understanding what's on the ballot and who's running for this or that and getting involved, just to that degree.
I had some people here at Sugarland Bible Church when I first came here in 2010 tell me you're a little bit overamped on politics. And I said, can you wait here for a minute? And I went to my office because I have a 3-volume set of what are called election sermons. Sermons that were preached in colonial America on the eve of an election.
Oh, sure.
And I just said to my critics, I said, here's a volume. Just read through this and tell me what you think. What you're going to discover is the stuff that those guys were saying back in the day.
Right.
My stuff is pretty mild by comparison.
Oh, absolutely. If you look back on the beginning of our government, there was Bible study in the Capitol.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, yes. And so many of these higher education institutions like Harvard and these places, they were founded on Christian principles. I mean, it's clear.
Right.
And look what's happened. And so that's why it's so important for the pastors and the churches to get involved.
But somewhere along the line, I don't know if it's the Scopes monkey trial era where we lost in the war in public opinion. Right. I would say we won the legal case, but we lost the publicity war. We got intimidated, and we got sort of pushed back into the church, and we sort of bought the line that the Bible applies to salvation, the Bible applies to your family life, the Bible applies to your personal business life, but it doesn't apply to the political realm. Somehow we bought into that.
Well, somehow we did, and that fear of just saying something or doing something. Andy, if you think about who has the most people together at one time, any place that can influence them in a way to do certain things, it's the church, it's the pastors. I mean, you think once a week you get this place nearly full of people. Larger churches, the same thing.
Yeah.
Occasionally I would watch Ed Young at Second, and he wasn't afraid to speak up.
Yeah, he did a great job when Anise Parker, you remember,
I was part of that.
was confiscating
in Austin, right.
trying to confiscate our sermon notes. Remember that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, and that makes a difference in our society especially when it gets published or gets out there that, hey, he's taking a stand.
Yeah.
And other pastors took a stand with him.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic. The Grace Church pastor was there too. So
see, I'm kind of hoping something like that could happen here in Sugar Land relative to this Islamic issue, because if the Muslims can rent out Town Square, can't we as the Christians rent out Town Square?
Absolutely.
And give our side of things?
Or you should be able to.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's from a city council and governance perspective. We would want to make sure that opportunity and freedom to do that is there, and I think it would be a grand idea to organize that.
And we need to speak. Here is a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, classic Bonhoeffer. He says, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself.
Right.
God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." Of course, he said that during Hitler's Nazi Germany. And so a lot of people have this idea, I'm going to sit it out or not say anything, but they're saying something when they do that.
They
right?
are acting. By not acting, as he said, and this is a great quote.
Yeah.
But by not doing something, you are doing something, and not saying something. When I was the county chairman, Republican Party chairman, when I went in, I developed a little slogan, and it was show up, stand up, and speak up, right? Because we want to know what you have to say and make a difference, and so that people started believing in that and doing that. Now that was a county, Fort Bend County at that time. We were very Republican county during those days, and that's changed now, right? And we had strong beliefs in our party system, and we used that, right? And so strong Christian beliefs. There were a lot of Christians involved, and I had put Christians in each of my key positions who would support that. But that's all changed now, right? And people are afraid to speak, or they're afraid to do something.
But the founders of this country set it up where the people would be the last defense against tyrannical behavior. Speaking of local elections, this Muslim issue is not the only issue. I mean, you've got school board issues where all over the country they're debating whether we're going to do the transsexual agenda, whether we're going to transition people from one gender to another without parental consent. We've got all over the country school board meetings related to the public library. I think that would be more the city government level, but just find out what level of government influences which issue, where they basically want to take pornography, I call it pornography, and put it into the public school or public library.
Well, fortunately, that's not happening in Texas,
Yeah.
and there's a great effort to prevent that, and legislatively, especially on the Senate side in Texas, they're taking strong action against things like that.
And Trump has done a lot of wonderful things, but the truth of the matter is Trump can't protect us from everything, right?
No,
because there's this idea that we've got our guy in and we're safe now, let's go to sleep for 4 years. But if you do that, this Muslim issue is going to rear its ugly head. These school board issues are going to raise their ugly head. These public school libraries are going to raise their ugly head.
It's a political process, and so thank God that he's in. My opinion that he is there, and he comes out and says things like, God created a man and a woman. That's it, right? And he can sign executive orders, but a lot of these things have to be followed up on by the Congress to put in place or supported, and that's like herding cats up there sometimes, just on the Republican side of the House. But those are good things, I think, that he's trying to do, and get. I mean, it's amazing how the issues have swapped from Democrats used to support women, and the Republicans were just hands off basically, and now it's reversed, where anything goes, right? Men and women's sports, and I mean, it's craziness what's happening.
Well, I've got some old videos of Al Gore back in the day promoting border enforcement.
And Nancy Pelosi and Biden, and so there's no consistency there. It's incredible where we live today. It is.
Now, if you want to know what the devil thinks about it, listen to Hitler was probably, I think, demonically possessed.
Yes.
There's a number of people. Erwin Lutzer wrote a book, I think his is called The Twisted Cross, where he's got quotes of people back in the day that said Hitler's voice would change when he gave speeches and so forth. So there's really little doubt in my mind that he was demonically possessed in the biblical sense. And notice what the demonically energized Hitler here in this screenshot said to Martin Niemöller, who was one of the few pastors that was speaking out against Hitler. Hitler said, and this quote, you can find it in Chuck Colson's book, Kingdoms in Conflict. Hitler is quoted here as saying, "I will protect the German people," speaking to Niemöller. "You take care of the church. You pastors should worry about getting people to heaven and leave this world to me," close quote. So if you don't believe, folks, what we're saying, at least believe what Satan is saying in terms of who should be involved in public life and who wants us out of public life.
That's right. I mean, thank God that, we had people come together and stop this. But that's right. But he mobilized the German people to follow. And it was demonic, but he did it, and just thank God we have.
And it seems to me the path was well paved before Hitler arrived, because it's almost like the churches were conditioned into not lack of involvement.
That's right. You stovepipe, you do your thing, and I'll take care of the rest of it. And but we can't let that happen today, and that to some degree. That is happening today. So, well,
those that don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. That's why we surface some of these quotes.
That's why we're standing up and speaking up.
Amen. Now, here's a quote from Ronald Reagan. He says, quote, this is his address to the annual meeting of the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, 1961. He says, "Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free," close quote. Can you imagine sitting there with your grandkids? I don't have any grandkids yet, but they're sitting there in my living room and they're asking me, what was Sugar Land like before it was Islamicized?
Right.
What was Sugar Land like before we had a sort of a Islamic theocracy, Sharia law? Tell us about that.
Right. And that Reagan was special.
Yes.
I mean, I think God put him there, and what he did was phenomenal. And what he said, he was the great communicator, right? And he said great things, but he was right, and he was truthful. And this is a real concern. I think we are almost maybe we're tipping in the right direction now.
A little bit, yeah.
But that tipping point was there before this last election. And thank God that we have things going on now that could do that, but we have to be careful about this. We have to be on watch to make sure we don't lose the United States, or we don't lose Texas, or our country, or our city.
Well, I had a number of people just kind of talking loosely, because I don't want to give people's identity away, but they're pretty high up in government, people I know personally, And they told me if this election, speaking of the one we just had with Trump and Kamala, if this election doesn't go the right way, the country, it's over. There's no recovery.
Right.
And praise the Lord, you know.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I follow it real closely.
Yes.
Once I got into the political arena, I mean, I watch it real closely, and yeah, I think we were really at what's called a tipping point, and if it had gone the other way.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's an opportunity and we can't waste this opportunity because numbers matter, and who's in charge of the Congress. And right now, I think the right people are in charge of Congress, and trying to do some really good things for our country. And we have to support that and keep that going. Otherwise, it could easily go back, right?
And it has implications for the gospel, because if they get their way with these hate speech type laws, our ability to communicate via the airwaves, the gospel is limited. Our capacity to meet is limited. Right. What we can say online is limited. So the fact that we are proclaimers of the gospel should give us a natural interest or curiosity in the legal system that allows us to do that. You know, Paul the Apostle used if you look at the end of Acts 16, he tips his hand, the Roman legal system to advance the cause for the gospel. And I'm finding that a lot of pastors don't think that way.
Unfortunately, you're right. And it's what I've seen in my limited experience there. But yes, I thought if I were in his shoes, and what would I say and how would I do it? Would I mind if I'm making people in the pews squirm a little bit? And the answer would be no, because I think that's the message that people need to hear. And so it's important what's happening in our churches today. There's no question about it in my mind. That's where this revolution has to start. Okay,
like the Black Robe Regiment that founded our nation.
Right. So the revolution can occur evolutionary, right? Because you can't flip the switch.
Right.
But it takes some time to do these things. But you got to get on the right path. And I really strongly believe that the church has a big role in that.
Yeah, the old saying used to be the role of the preacher was to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Right, make you feel good.
And so we need to
you need to do that too.
Need to do both, right?
Right.
Yeah, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. People should go to church and at time to time feel uncomfortable, or else why go?
Right.
That's the nature of Scripture. It corrects one of its purposes.
Right.
And here we're offering a major paradigm shift correction that the two of us both believe needs to happen.
Needs to happen, yeah. Right. It's what our country was founded on, I believe.
Absolutely. Now, what if we lose America?
Well, I don't want to be in that world.
Here's Reagan again, A Time for Choosing. 1964, famous quote. I think we can put that quote up. He says, "Not long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of his friends turned to the other and said, 'We don't know how lucky we are.' And the Cuban stopped and said, 'How lucky you are? I had some place to escape to.' And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there is no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth."
For sure.
Close quote.
Oh, it's totally. I mean, this is where we are, and going back to what I said earlier. Thank God that direction is changing, and lots of great things are happening or on the verge of happening, and so we have to support that. And the opposition is going to be there, but right now we have the numbers, and we have to make the numbers work for us and work for our country, and supporting our Constitution and supporting what we believe in our biblical principles.
And I like your emphasis on numbers matter, because tax time, numbers matter. right?
That's right.
Budgets,
That's right.
numbers matter. So why can't we think that way about politics?
Well, we can. And so I do.
Yes.
I remember when I first started running for the Texas House, a couple of my very dear friends who were in the House, had been there for a while, I said, "Hey, Phil, why can't you get this done?" He said, "Rick, numbers matter." And so I said, "Oh my gosh, okay, that's right. So and we have to remember that. And so when any policy making or budgetary making group, be it the state or the city or the school boards or the county, you name it, the number of people who can make that decision, the right decision, has to be the number that we want, right? And we have to fight for that. We have to do it.
So to help us with that, I wrote a little book called The Bible in Your Vote. I think we have a screenshot of it. There's a QR code where people can get this. And I'll just be a little transparent here. Based on some of the numbers I've gotten from Amazon, I was a little discouraged because the traction for something like this just isn't there. I've gotten a lot better feedback on other things I've written. However, I was so heartened when you came and spoke at our men's group a week or two ago, and you brought the book with you. I don't even think I gave you that book. You must have ordered it online.
I did. I ordered it.
And if you look at his copy, he's got all these
tabs,
sticky notes in it. He's got the whole thing underlined, and the Holy Spirit kind of used that to sort of comfort me. Like, it doesn't matter the breadth of the readership, it's the people in the right positions reading it. So there's obviously something about that book that you appreciated.
Well, I didn't know. I must have missed it because you wrote this before the last election in November, and that was I'm assuming that was your intent.
That was the goal. We had a little
Right.
timing issue. We didn't quite get it out in time.
Right.
It came out right after the last election. But the thing that people need to understand is this book transcends election cycles. It's not a Trump
Oh yeah.
versus Kamala book. It's a Bible study, and it will take you through every issue you'll ever vote on in a national or state or local election, and it's there to equip the body of Christ on how to vote biblically.
It very much so, and it all comes down to who we are voting for and what do they stand for and what do they believe. And so I had missed this, but for some reason the Lord showed it to me when I was preparing to come talk to your men's group. And I said, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this. So I ordered it right away, got it the next day.
All right.
And so then I started going through it, and I said, well, this is perfect, right? Because it educates or teaches, shows the people who should be voting who to vote for and why. Get to know who these candidates are. What do they stand for? What do they believe? On
these different areas that are important to God.
Oh, yeah. And all the right areas, by the way, I might add, because I went through, tabbed it, and so I can understand it. So,
well, here's a chart: biblical voting issues. This is just a small excerpt of some of the things we deal with in the book. You'll notice there's a scripture verse next to each one.
Yeah.
But where does the candidate stand on the earth experiencing cyclical patterns? Where does the candidate stand on limited government, legal protection for the unborn? Heterosexual marriage is the standard for society, parental authority over children. You know, as I mentioned before, school districts in many places will transition the gender of a child, and the parents have no knowledge of it.
Right.
The right to keep and bear arms is mentioned in the Bible. The enforceability of our national borders is in the Bible. Is the candidate a nationalist or a globalist? Does the candidate believe in pursuing peace through strength? And a lot of people that write these kind of books come from more of a reformed point of view.
That's right.
So they're already kind of replacement theology oriented. So they don't have anything to say about Israel because they think God is finished with Israel. But see, I'm a dispensationalist, as are you.
Right.
And we believe that God has a future for Israel, and God actually evaluates nations based on how they're treating the Jews.
I think he said that. So,
Genesis 12.
right. So all these are essential, and if we just got the Christians involved to understand this, and the candidates. Now, can I mention this?
Yeah. Now, here's another book that we're recommending. It's called, we don't have a screenshot for it, but it's called The Political Imperative, The Assignment from God, The Biblical Role of Christians in Public Policy, Civil Government, and the Political Process. This is by a friend of yours, Norm Mason. He's basically going down the same rabbit trail. Well, shouldn't call it a rabbit trail.
No, it's not a rabbit trail. It's
the same important.
It's
let me
right
rephrase
path.
that. The right path, as the Jeremiah says. Search for that ancient path.
That's right.
Yeah, and so he's going down the same Jeremiah 6, which should be a well-trodden path, but isn't.
Right.
And you're very fond of this book because you've talked to me about this book for a number of years, ever since I've known you. So why are you a fan of this book?
Well, because Norm was in the beginning of my political work or thinking. Norm was right there to help guide me in that. And in this book, he wrote this book where he points out that God is created and is the head of the family and the civil government and the church. And so because of that, people in the church are called, or should be called, to understand that biblical role of Christians in all forms of the political process. The most important form is to vote. And so I took this, and then the Rick Scarborough thing, and Norm Mason, and is to actually get involved and be part of the process. And so that's why I did that. And it was very important. The Spirit moving me to move in that direction. And I started at the I started as a precinct chair, right? And I won my precinct race by 5 votes.
Wow!
And I convinced 5 Democrats to vote for me. Maybe they're the ones who did it. But so if you take this book, that's the imperative to get involved and be part of the process, and you match it with Andy's book on who to vote for and why to vote for them and what they stand for, those two, for me, and I hadn't seen this, but they really come together very nicely and understanding all that. But I would recommend getting this book. You can get this book from Amazon as well. I don't know, $20 or so. I don't know what it costs, but I gave you a copy of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And my book's available on Amazon and Andy Wood's Ministries, etc.
One of the things that I really like in the back of this book, that I mentioned to you the other day, was the last part is setting up a Christian citizenship program or committee in the church to help inform your congregation, people in the pews, what's going on. Not from necessarily a political party perspective, but just these are the things that are happening. This is what's happening in Austin. This right now during the legislative session. These are the things happening in the city council. These are the things that are and to provide that information so people are more informed. Maybe it'll get them to a point where they'll do it on their own, right? And you can lead them. You can give them the fish, but the idea is to teach them to fish.
Amen.
Right? And so I think that would be, I think it's a fantastic idea. And I had not seen that until just coming to talk to your men's group. I don't know why I missed that.
Well, you mentioned a salt and light committee in the church.
That's what it would be.
Now, we have committees for everything. Right?
I don't know.
Jesus said in the Great Commission, go into the world and build committees. Christianity has, I mean, we have a missions committee. We have you name it, we've got a committee in this church. Why can't we have another committee?
Why can't we? Because that's what we're talking about, right? Because if
it seems so common sense.
If not enough people get involved to understand the significance of the issue we were just talking about today, and what that could mean to the future of our community or to the future of our country, then we're going to lose it. Yeah. We're going to lose it. And so it can start small, but we can have this ever expanding. But hey, you know what that church is doing over there?
Yeah.
You know what that church is doing over, or bring the coalition of churches together, do something in town square, and something like that could feed on itself and really make a difference in the city, in the county, or the state.
Yeah.
And
I like what you say. The Bible says, "Don't despise the day of small beginnings."
Right.
I mean, you didn't start as a member of the House. No. You just said you were a precinct chair.
I started as a precinct chair, then became the county chairman. Then I went to the State House. Thought about running for Congress, and I didn't. But now I'm running for city council.
God's got you right where He wants you.
Right.
We encourage Christians to be fat, faithful, available, teachable.
I like it.
Yeah. So, well, we've got a big election coming up locally here in Sugar Land. We got some important dates. I've got down April 22nd, early voting starts. So by the time this broadcast is playing, early voting will be underway for a couple of days. And then the main election is May the 3rd.
That's right.
What other things should we bring up here?
If you want to know who I would recommend to vote, just give me a call or send me an email, and I can help you with understanding who I think are the right people running. There are two candidates specifically for the Fort Bend ISD trustees, and those people really control what that independent school district does. Now, the state provides some guidance, right, on the curriculum and things like that, but it makes a difference. The numbers make a difference, and so those two people are really good. And who's running for city council, I can help with that too.
And a number of candidates running are Islamic.
Yes, there are a number running in every race.
We want to know where their mind is at on some of these things.
Well, and if their mind is right, and they're here for our country and our city, and supporting and assimilate into our system, I fully support that. I don't care what they are, right? And so that's what it should be about, right? I'm running for reasons to make the city the best it can be in every way.
Now, I will, in closing here, quote John Jay. We don't have a screenshot of it, but he was our first Chief Justice to the United States Supreme Court, appointed by George Washington. And he made a statement that, and this is his words, so don't get mad at me out there. I'm just quoting the guy. He said it is our duty in our Christian nation. That's an exact expression that he used verbatim. He believed America was a Christian nation. It is our duty as Christians in our Christian nation to elect Christians as our rulers.
Amen. So yes, I mean, that's great, and I fully support that. But there are others out there, and you have to recognize that, and that's what our country stands for. But I agree with that. That's why we're talking about this.
And there's a meme which I've used before, floating around out there, from Teddy Roosevelt, who probably was one of our more progressive presidents if you look at the big picture. But even he says in America there's room for one flag, and that's the American flag.
Yeah.
And he says there's room for one language, which is the English language.
Yeah. One of the things that I got into the Texas platform was one flag, one nation, one language. It was in the. Now, I don't know if it's still there or not, but I was part of the Republican Party platform committee, and that was in our platform because another gentleman here was on that committee with me, and we got that into the platform.
That's great.
Right.
That's great. All right, folks. Well, get to know Rick Miller if you're living in Sugar Land District number 4, or know people living in that district.
Well, District 4 is what I'm running for, but if I get elected, I'll be representing the whole city as well.
So where do people go to learn more about you? Do you have a website?
I don't have a website right now. You can Wikipedia me.
Okay.
So based on that, but I had a 30-year military career.
Yeah.
Then
You were a pilot too.
I was a Navy pilot. I'm wearing my wings
Yeah,
today.
I see that. Yeah.
Right. So, yes.
And you loved the Top Gun, the second one.
Oh, I loved it.
Because
That was great.
I went to see it, and then I went to your Facebook page to see what you thought about it, and you gave a glowing.
It was much. I remember the first one too, and that was okay. But the second one was pretty right on. It was good. I'd love to see it from a naval aviation perspective. And by the way, Tom Cruise, my son, was commanding officer of the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier.
Okay.
And Tom Cruise went on his ship in San Diego and talked to his troops, talked to the Scott's crew, and then they actually released the movie early in San Diego so they could go see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
that's awesome.
So I have pictures of my son, the captain of the ship, and Tom Cruise.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, we busted the clock a little bit, but we have an important discussion. I hope people out there will get to know Rick Miller, pray for Rick, and pray that God would raise up a lot of people like Rick for our country, such a time as this. So with that being said, we will see you next time, Lord willing, on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you.
Thank you.